Processed foods are full of deuterium, they're full of seed oils. It's also sort of traumatized food. And again, food isn't just calories and hydrogen and electrons, it's information. And it's not even proper food. And on a quantum level, you know, we all know it's inflammatory, but just putting that chaotic sort of chemical junk into your body and expecting your mitochondria to be all right with that and not to totally create an inflammation bomb in your body is just complete insanity. And I think a lot of the benefits that people see from doing keto and carnivore is a deuterium depletion, and they're also making more water in the mitochondria. And as I've said before, we are a giant water being, and it's like the brain's also about 70%, if not more, of exclusion zone water, so it's there for a reason.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching our videos. If you'd like to support us some more, you can explore our homemade natural skincare products at purelytallow.com. Thank you so much for supporting my small business. Hey everybody, welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and today my guest is Sara Pugh. She has a PhD in molecular mechanisms, quantum biology certification, and a ketogenic therapy certification. And I'm so grateful that you could make the time to spend with us today, Sara.
Oh, thank you, Serena. It's really lovely to be here.
We're going to talk about being a female and what that does to our weight, along with our hormones, some leptin stuff. I do want to get into a little bit about ketogenic diets and whether or not that's something that you recommend. And I also want to talk about fasting. I feel like if my cortisol is high and I'm really stressed, I should sleep in and get as much sleep as I need, but probably I should go ahead and get up right before the sun comes up, go stand in the grass and watch the sun come up and then go for a walk. Does that sound like that's better than sleeping in for somebody who may be having some issues with cortisol or leptin?
Oh yeah, definitely, because also the thyroid system's very tied to the sunrise, and the central retinol pathway that gets activated at sunrise, and then that's like a cascade, so it sets off all the rest of the hormones for the day. So it's one of these things that it's about understanding why you woke up with high cortisol in the first place, because it's very likely something you did not just the evening, but probably in the morning of the day before, because setting our body clock starts in the morning because we want to see the sunrise, set off the hormone cascade. Yes, go grounding and go for a walk, move about a bit, because that moves your fascia and you can produce electrons that way, and it's good for your brain. And I have found that, say, if I woke up early, if you lie there just stressing about everything, it kind of makes it worse. If you actually get up and get going, it might be uncomfortable for a couple of days, but that's the same with everything of making a new habit. Your brain's going to protest in the beginning, but it's going to be better later. You definitely do want to see the sunrise, especially if you've got hormone problems. But I just think it's like non-negotiable, if that makes sense. And it's something, if a situation arises, if I go somewhere or something happens and I can't see the sunrise, I'll go crazy because it's so ingrained. And I used to love like having lies in before I knew about this. So yeah, I think it is important, especially if someone's got thyroid issues, to see the morning sun, and definitely for leptin, because you want to start to retrain circadian rhythm. But it's also really important for preventing cancer as well, because if your body clock, as in your master clock, is out of line, the way the body propagates the information, it oscillates down the body to the organs, and then every organ has cells, and each of those cells has a clock in it. And the cell cycle, as in just very simply whether a cell should die or live, is the cell cycle. So if your body clock's misaligned, then your body isn't sure, should I kill this cell or should I let it live? And that there are numerous studies on bad circadian rhythms and cancer and diabetes and heart disease and depression and things like that. So it's something we've known about for a long time. So definitely, yes, I'd think somebody should see the sunrise. And also they're really beautiful as well. And even if it's cloudy, you still get benefits, because there's always going to be the signal from the sun, and then there's always going to be the near infrared light, the one I was saying that can penetrate really deep into our bodies and concentrate in important parts like our cerebral spinal fluid or brain or mitochondria. And that's always available, even if it's cloudy. So no matter what, and there's always electrons outside, and it's better than being inside. I appreciate some people have got to go to work or take children to school, but you can still open the window in the car or at work, because a little bit's always better than nothing.
And go ahead and eat breakfast then too, that early, because like we're conditioned to fast, right? Don't break your fast until after you work out. Like if everything is all about fasting. So do we go ahead and eat breakfast that early too? Is that how we kind of set our bodies up for starting the day?
Yeah, because if you have it, cortisol is really high in the morning anyway. So obviously the first thing is not to have a coffee straight away because you'll blow your own head off. And having breakfast's a timekeeper. And also I think fasting's brilliant. And when people have reset their leptin or eaten in a more sensible way, I've found if I've had enough in the day, I'll skip dinner because again, eating after sunset or eating too late is going to not only disturb leptin, but the gut wants to go to bed. And once it's got dark, your body thinks it's nighttime and it isn't, and the mitochondria are not expecting food. So yeah, definitely. That's the thing about fasting. I think especially for women over a certain age, if you want to do it, just miss dinner because I just think the morning part is that important. And I've just seen so many people. I used to fast in the morning and not eat till 4 o'clock, and then I thought that was normal and then found out for multiple reasons it wasn't the right way round. So I haven't got any issues with fasting. I just think sometimes forcing your body to do something like not eating when it really wants to isn't a good idea. Whereas forcing it to see the sunrise, which is it's supposed to see that, it is fine. So that's my sort of thoughts on cortisol and in particular and fasting.
So when do you recommend fasting and for how long? Like what is your preference for that? Do you like 72-hour fast for people, 36-hour fast, or just kind of that intermittent fasting from, like mid-afternoon until morning?
I think it depends on the context because if
Okay.
somebody's already leptin resistant, if you try and fast, because when we fast, we activate the AMPK pathway, and that doesn't work properly if you've got leptin resistance. So what happens then in the mitochondria? They panic. And sometimes too much fasting, too much autophagy means the body is running out of tissue. So it's going to start digging into your stem cells early, and you definitely don't want that. So that's my issue with fasting. If there's something wrong with your metabolism, your body's sensing you're in starvation mode, because even obese people can be in starvation mode because of leptin, or somebody already with a history of disordered eating, trying to fast and restrict even more, your body's going to react in an adverse way. So there's a time and a place for fasting. And also, like anything, people do it to excess. Because personally, if I'm going to do it, I'll miss dinner. I don't do it every single day, but sometimes I just think, what's the point of eating? You're not even hungry. So I wouldn't do it then. And then if I do longer fasts, I do 48 hours or 72 hours, say once a month or once every 6 weeks. And I always fast if I'm traveling for 48 hours because there's so much disruption with jet lag and non-native EMFs and blue lights in airports. And also it stops me eating anything at all. Because even if something might look low carb on the aeroplane, there's goodness knows what animal it might even be. They might say it's beef, but it could be anything, could be something that's been scraped off the road. So, I think it's just fasting obviously has a very strong spiritual and religious aspect to it. So I think there's a really good aspect there of going without, delaying gratification, or even for people who've never done anything other than eat 6 meals a day, just fasting for them teaches them about true hunger. But there's always people that will do something to excess and then cause problems for themselves, because fasting should be kind of fun and enjoyable if you're in the right state. Whereas if people are forcing themselves to do it, they're just obsessing, oh, I can't wait to have my dinner, and that's all they'll think about all morning. And again, sometimes people's hormones, they just haven't got the capacity or the energy or the progesterone or whatever to be able to sustain doing a fast. And it's just something that everybody's an individual and an N equals one. And also it's more natural to fast in the winter because it's a season of scarcity. Whereas in the summer when the fruit's out, even if people don't eat fruit, your biology knows it's there and it wants to eat it. So I've always found doing fasting or strict keto at that time of the year is always much more difficult because it's going against what nature it has on offer.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what about ketosis? You mentioned ketosis a couple of minutes ago. What do you think about ketosis? Is it good long term? Can that damage things? Can that cause more trouble for people with cortisol and leptin issues?
Yeah, obviously with keto, I do it myself and I'm trained in it. And I think because of there's so much extra burden on our bodies, like non-native EMFs that affect our mitochondria and stop them making water, and all the blue light that shoves our blood sugar up. It's extremely foolish to not do something that's low carb, because low carb could mean 50 to 100 grams for a certain person. So there's that to start with, because the main reason I think a keto diet's important is our bodies can make twice as much water from a fat-based diet than they can from a carbohydrate-based diet. And secondly, fat is very low in deuterium and carbs are not. And deuterium is just an isotope of hydrogen. And it's not evil or anything, it's just there, but it's only a problem when we have too much of it. And I think a lot of the benefits that people see from doing keto and carnivore is a deuterium depletion, and they're also making more water in the mitochondria. And as I've said before, we are a giant water being. So that's why no matter what, whoever I work with, I'm not tolerating pro-metabolic, or I've tried every way of eating. And it's like, I just think maybe 100 years ago you could do that, but not in this environment. So some kind of low carb way of eating, I think, is important. For some people, they do actually need to go into ketosis and stay in it because they've got cancer or bipolar or epilepsy. But then in saying that, there is a beneficial reason to eat seasonal and local vegetables sometimes when they're there, or for women who really have trouble with their menstrual cycles. You can get cabbages and things and different vegetables all year round in different places that grow naturally. And we're evolved to have them. I'm not saying that everybody should be keto or carnivore or whatever. I'm just saying you've got to sort of listen to your own body and your own needs, because first of all, at a hormonal level, it can be helpful for some people with leptin and thyroid to break ketosis now and again. But then with clients and people, life happens and people pretty much break ketosis or whatever naturally because there's a party or a family event, or they just feel like it, and then they feel really guilty and they've done something bad, or worse, they'll binge. Whereas a controlled use of sort of low inflammatory plants or carbs can be really helpful. And also in the mitochondria, when we burn fat as a fuel, the electrons from fat don't go through complex 1, and that's the one that leaks free radicals. So free radicals aren't bad either. They're only bad when there's too many in the wrong place. So with fat, they skip over complex 1 and just go down complex 2, 3, 4, and 5 and make water and ATP. But the thing is, if complex 1 was useless, it wouldn't be there. So there is value in pushing electrons through that sometimes, because it leaks a lot of free radicals. And this can blow up or kill old and damaged mitochondria, which can be really helpful. So it is a sort of part of autophagy that people have not considered, because again, we don't want the sort of older mitochondria hanging around. Like the government in this country every 10 years or so tries to get all the old banger cars off the road because they're polluting. So you can just think of old mitochondria like that. But again, it's always about doing it in a controlled way. And also for some people I work with, that's not going to work, because even a potato would trigger all sorts of, and then those kind of people can take months to get back on the bandwagon again. And I do have friends, and I know people who are perfectly happy on keto and carnivore, and they're thriving. I just think, we're all different. We all live in different locations, and you need to match your way of eating to where you live and how much sun there is. So somewhere like the UK or Scandinavia and Canada as well, that's a perfect place to do a keto or a carnivore diet, because it's cold and it's dark, whereas somewhere more equatorial with sun, where other kind of fruit grows, it might be okay to have some now and again. But if you live at the equator, you shouldn't be telling everybody on the planet they must eat all of the fruit and the honey, because they might live in the UK or Seattle or somewhere where it's completely inappropriate to eat those kind of fruits because they don't grow there, and it's not your body can't deal with that much sugar and that much deuterium without the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. And people who aren't following a ketogenic diet typically are just all over the place and eating, the standard American diet, which is something between 70 and 80% processed foods, which is really, really scary and completely explains why we have the health issues that we have. And I don't understand why doctors aren't telling people to stop eating the processed foods.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like processed foods are full of deuterium, they're full of seed oils. It's also sort of traumatized food. And again, food isn't just calories and hydrogen and electrons, it's information. And it's not even proper food. And on a quantum level, we all know it's inflammatory, but just putting that chaotic sort of chemical junk into your body and expecting your mitochondria to be all right with that and not to totally create an inflammation bomb in your body is just complete insanity. Yeah, and I don't understand that. I think earlier you said about the general public being 20 years out of date with the science. I think so are the doctors, because the doctors and the patients have the same conversation. But
Right.
also, some doctors eat the standard American diet, or they'll
Yep.
eat a processed vegetarian or vegan diet. And I haven't got any issues with vegetarianism. I think it's difficult to do and you have to really be strict. But people,
Yes.
there's too much processed rubbish to tempt people with those ways of eating. So they may have been acceptable in certain places 100 years ago, but now, I just think it's advocating or just saying to a patient, oh, why don't you just eat less meat and go vegetarian? They're just going to eat cheese and bread and goodness knows what else. So, and I do know doctors who think they're healthy because they're plant-based or vegetarian, and they don't seem to have any concept of what they're doing to their mitochondria. So that's why I tend to go for the physics side and start talking about electrons and light and hydrogen, because even though it sounds complicated the first time, all doctors went to university, they all know what a mitochondria is. And it's people get very triggered and defensive over food, even if they've got loads of problems themselves and they're misinforming their patients who are just getting bigger and sicker. So I'd love to get in the head of a doctor, because sometimes I think, are you just so ignorant, or are you doing it on purpose? That's the thing. That's what
Yeah.
I've always wondered, because I don't know. I mean, you may have spoken to doctors or know people, and whether it's just pure ignorance or they're just, and a lot of, I have some friends who are doctors, and I say that you work in a sausage factory, and the sausage factory has rules, and the doctors, if they disobey the rules of the sausage factory and they tell people to eat meat, or they don't prescribe SSRIs or benzos or statins, they get punished. So I don't know whether it's the system or the doctor or what, because it just seems, for an intelligent person that went to medical school, it's just, I can't grasp their thought process.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing is just insane to me. So what about things like biohacking, like cold therapy? Can we talk about cold therapy and how important that is? I just got an ice bath for Christmas.
The Instagram video of your
You
first
did.
plunge.
That was ridiculously hard. And I'm telling you, it sat in my living room for 3 weeks. That's how scared I was. And now I'm doing it every day. We're supposed to do things that we do not like every single day to help our brain. And so that's good that I'm making myself do this, but it's really difficult. And I just wonder, for people who aren't doing it and don't know, like, don't understand it, cold showers can do it, a cold bath in your bathtub. But what are the benefits of something like cold exposure?
Yeah, first of all, just from an evolutionary perspective, we're meant to be cold adapted. And at the moment, we're just warm adapted, because we're not supposed to just live in houses with heating on. So that's already a problem.
Yeah.
And then another really important aspect of cold exposure is it's anti-inflammatory. It makes us produce neurotransmitters like noradrenaline, dopamine, and oxytocin. And these are really important if somebody has addictions, or depression, or lack of motivation. Then, from a diabetes and leptin perspective, the brown fat we have, that's nature's answer to diabetes. So if we're just sitting inside all day in the warmth, where we shrink our brown fat, so we've got less protection against insulin resistance and diabetes. Whereas if we expose these areas, like it's around here on your chest and collarbone and on at the back of your neck and around your shoulders, we need to expose the brown fat to the cold, so the white fat will start to beige and then brown, and then we can expand our brown adipose tissue. And this is the one that can, babies have lots of this, and babies are supposed to be in ketosis, and that's why they don't like wearing clothes, because they're very, very cold adapted. Whereas with an adult, that offers you protection against blood sugar or insulin related problems. So number one, the cold thermogenesis is really important for insulin, and it can also help with leptin sensitivity as well, because again, lots of people are leptin resistant, or a little bit or a lot leptin resistant, so it won't do anybody any harm. Again, like I said, it's anti-inflammatory, and for some people who can't exercise yet, a cold plunge can be really beneficial from a sort of metabolic standpoint, because you're going to cool yourself down and your body has to find energy to warm you back up again. So it can be a bit like a workout, although the way the mitochondria get more stimulated in cold plunges is different to how it would happen in exercise, because when we cool the body down, the mitochondria are going to go crazy and make more and more heat. So that's going to heat the water around in the area. When you heat water, it actually compresses. So it squashes the electron transport chain closer together. And anything in electronics, when you make stuff closer together, it all works better. So in sort of unpacking that in simple ways, that the cold is going to boost your metabolism in several ways, and it's going to make your mitochondria more efficient. And the more efficient your mitochondria, the less inflammation you have. And the less inflammation you have, the less sort of setup you have just for weight gain, for example, because inflammation can lead to weight gain along with lots of other things. So I would say those are the main benefits of doing cold thermogenesis. And I just think it's something that nature provided for us naturally, especially in colder climates, because people who live in the colder climates, their mitochondrial haplogroups are uncoupled. So they're designed to be able to make heat instead of, so that they can use food and they can make lots of heat, because it would have been a risk living in the UK 1,000 years ago and dying of the cold. So it's something very normal and very natural. So I wouldn't really call it a biohack per se. I just say it's something people should be doing. And in terms of where people start, sometimes just opening the windows and turning the heating down, that's because anything below your own body temperature is cold thermogenesis. And for some people, just doing that for a week is the first step. And then the other thing that people can do is, instead of jumping out of the shower and rubbing themselves with a towel, they can just stand in the cold air with the window open and dry in the air. And that can be a gentle way in, because just if anyone's listening who's got sort of thyroid disease or adrenal fatigue, it's not a good idea to do cold plunges yet, but you can do all of the easy things. And then the other thing people can do is a cold face plunge, because that's going to stimulate the neurotransmitters. And then people would, they can, like you said, put water in their bath, depending on where they live and the ambient temperature, and get in that and get used to the full cold immersion. Because if you do a cold shower, they're first of all really uncomfortable, and it's really difficult to do it for ages, but also the medium of cold transfer is happening through air, not water, and water's, I think, 10 times better. So really you've got to get the full immersion in the water. And I always say with people, I don't necessarily think they should hate it. I think part of cold plunging is when you've got to actually get into it the first time, you've got to force yourself. And it's a bit like forcing yourself to make an Instagram post or write a difficult email. You get used to just doing it. But again, people get really addicted or really into cold therapy or cold thermogenesis, because I got massively into outdoor swimming last year, because again, if you can do cold plunges in water like the ocean or a lake, that's even better, because now you've got the ultimate grounding experience and the sunlight. So that's another way to sort of progress with it, because sometimes if you make people do something and it's too much for them, yes, it is stressful and it's going to raise cortisol in an unwanted way, and they genuinely really don't like it. And also for women who have cycles, it's not a very good idea to do cold plunges the week before your period, or maybe the first couple of days, but your body will sort of tell you it doesn't really want to, so you have to sort of honor that. Although I know a lot of people who've still cold plunged or swum outside and been okay. So there's a lot to cold thermogenesis as well. And the other really important thing about it is it can make our bodies make low-level ultraviolet light inside us. So people who live somewhere cold and they don't have a sun, like Canada or the UK, we can sort of make our own internal sunshine using cold. And then we don't run into so many of the problems of a lack of ultraviolet light. So that would be not being able to make enough dopamine and thyroid and other hormones that are dependent on ultraviolet light. Also, you can make neuromelanin or melanin inside you from cold thermogenesis, and that's really important for everything, like your nerves. All cells have got melanin around them. The gut's got melanin in it. The brain has loads of it in the substantia nigra. So there's just numerous benefits of doing cold thermogenesis, but it's like everything. You treat it like exercise. If you've never exercised before, you wouldn't go and do a CrossFit class or an adult gymnastics class. You'd start off with something like Z Health, for example, or beginners Pilates, or sort of mobility for men, and then you'd move up. So I think a lot of it is people make it too cold too early. Because I always say to people, just make it about 55 to 60 Fahrenheit to start with. Because some people buy a cold plunge and make it be things like, 35 Fahrenheit and it's got ice in it. And I just think that's such a shock. Just ease yourself in gradually, and you don't need to sort of swim in a lake tomorrow. Just treat it like you would doing exercise for the first time, or even changing your way of eating, because some people really struggle to just suddenly go carnivore overnight. They have to go paleo and then low carb and then keto, and then they just slide happily into carnivore and ketovore, and it's all nice and comfortable for them. Whereas other people, I think it's like the pulling off the plaster in one go, but versus peeling it off kind of idea with things. I think it's just better with cold plunges to not dive in. And also, again, because of the shock aspect of people who've got any sort of cardiovascular concerns, that they definitely would need to do the easier cold first. But like I said, just going outside for a walk and being cold is cold thermogenesis, same as opening the window. So it's really easy to do when people think about it. Because just as a matter of interest, what state are you in, and what's the temperature of your cold plunge?
Me, Virginia, in the United States. And so the first time, I can't remember, I think it was 55. I had just filled it that day. So it was about 55. And it felt very, very cold. Now, I will say I made a terrible mistake the next day. It was 14 degrees outside. The water temperature was 32. And I thought, what the heck? That was 2 weeks ago, and I'm still paying for it. I think I may have given myself frost nip, which is like right before frostbite.
Oh yeah, yeah. You have to be really careful of ears and toes and fingers with cold. Yes.
Yeah, it was my fingers. The pain that night was horrendous. I couldn't touch my fingers. I couldn't put my pajamas on. It hurt so badly on my fingers. And then I woke up the next morning with pain here and
Oh
on my
yeah.
side here, I guess where the skin is more sensitive in those areas. And I'm still suffering. It's still very itchy right in
Oh yeah,
here.
yeah. You
Keeps me up
definitely
at
get,
night.
yeah, nerve damage because it
Yes.
will burn it. And that's why I always say to people, to be careful, and not you're not having a competition with all these
Right.
men online who get in ice baths that they've
Right.
probably practiced for 3 years. But yeah, I think it's like
Yeah.
anything. That's why I did say at that particular temperature, like 35 Fahrenheit and 32, that's
Mhm.
super cold.
Yeah, it was very cold. There was a thin layer of ice on it. There was snow everywhere because it had been snowing. It was way too cold. And since then, I tried adding, and I had tried adding boiling water that day. I just couldn't get it up. I've tried that a couple of other times, but it's been 50 degrees, I guess, for the last week. Today it was 45, but I went ahead and did it because now I'm 2 weeks in. And I felt like that 5 degrees probably isn't going to make that much of a difference. And I'm fine. I haven't had any issues. I think the coldest I had done, except for the one really cold one up until today, was maybe 49. It's hard to tell on that little thermometer that they give you, but 49 probably was the coldest until today. And it wasn't any harder to get in. I feel fine. So, but I wouldn't do 32 again for a really long time. I think that was a little bit extreme, and I wish I hadn't done it. And that would be my advice, is to not go too cold too fast, because like I said, it's been 2 weeks and I'm actually still dealing with it.
Rome wasn't built in a day and all of this. And everything's always a journey. So that's what I think. Like the sunrise, some is better than none.
Yeah, I love it. Sarah, thank you so much. This was really educational, and I hope it helps some people today.
Oh, no, thank you. It was lovely to chat with you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the Carnivore Revolution.